very bad for Russia. I don't want to do that because I want to get peace. I want to see peace, and we'll see. But in a financial sense, yeah, we could do things very bad for Russia.
Between our two countries. That is why this is the greatest alliance for prosperity and security I think the world has ever seen.
Donald Trump has just delivered a blistering assessment of Kier Starmer's approach to Russia, and it's sending shockwaves through Whitehall.
Whenever necessary, we absolutely backed each other up, and that's at the
Could
core
you take on Russia by yourselves?
Well,
The former US president didn't mince words when he questioned Britain's ability to stand firm against Putin without American muscle behind them. But what makes this truly alarming is the timing. Coming just days after Russian MP Ivan Popov publicly warned that Starmer's reckless policies are putting Britain in the crosshairs. Is Starmer genuinely caught in a dangerous diplomatic trap of his own making? The evidence suggests he might be playing a game he can't possibly win. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Trump's bombshell question to Starmer has sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles.
Between our two countries. That is why this is the greatest alliance for prosperity and security I think the world has ever seen.
Could you take on Russia by yourselves? It wasn't just a casual inquiry, it was a calculated public challenge that exposed the fundamental weakness in Britain's military posture. The former US president knew exactly what he was doing, deliberately putting Starmer in an impossible position that revealed the hollow nature of Britain's tough talk on Russia. What makes this diplomatic trap so devastating is how it strips away the veneer of British military capability.
British Prime Minister Kier Starmer has said he's willing to put British troops in Ukraine as peacekeepers after any deal.
While Starmer has been posturing on the world stage, Trump's question laid bare what military experts have been saying for years. The UK's armed forces have been hollowed out to the point where confronting a nuclear superpower alone would be utterly disastrous. Trump's follow-up statement that he could do things financially that would be very bad for Russia wasn't just boasting. It highlighted the stark power imbalance between American capabilities and Britain's limited options.
Vladimir Putin, which is one of the things that I've been pointing out to people, that, you know, the kind of derangement around the Trump administration is quite clear.
While Trump can threaten economic warfare that would genuinely hurt Putin, Starmer's arsenal of diplomatic and economic tools looks positively anemic by comparison. This disparity became painfully obvious at the G20 summit, where Starmer attempted to double down on supporting Ukraine. Instead of demonstrating strength, his performance left key allies unconvinced of Britain's commitment and capabilities. One European diplomat reportedly remarked that Starmer was all talk, no substance when pressed on specifics about military support. The Prime Minister's position becomes even more precarious when examining his contradictory statements about Ukraine. On one hand, he suggested British troops could serve as peacekeepers, a notion that borders on military intervention. On the other, he insists Britain isn't looking to provoke Russia directly. It's an unsustainable position that has left both allies and adversaries questioning Britain's resolve and strategy. Perhaps most damaging are the reports of Trump's private conversations with other world leaders about Starmer. Sources close to the former president claim he described the British PM as a lightweight who doesn't understand how dangerous Putin can be. This behind-closed-doors assessment has reportedly filtered through to other NATO leaders, further undermining Starmer's credibility. The critical question now isn't whether Starmer's approach is merely ineffective, it's whether it's actively dangerous for Britain's security interests. By projecting strength without the capability to back it up, he risks provoking Russia while simultaneously disappointing allies.
Very bad for Russia. I don't want to do that because I want to get peace. I want to see peace, and we'll see. But in a financial sense, yeah, we could do things very bad for Russia.
It's a lose-lose scenario that leaves the UK increasingly isolated on the world stage. Starmer's diplomatic gamble has unleashed exactly what security experts feared most: a direct military threat from Moscow. Russian MP Ivan Popov's television appearance wasn't merely political theatre, but a calculated warning that Britain has crossed a dangerous line.
Mr. Starmer, Mr. Macron threatening to my country by nuke. Why?
When a senior Russian official explicitly declares they would not hesitate to respond with force, we're witnessing something far more serious than routine diplomatic posturing. The Kremlin's messaging strategy is crystal clear. Popov delivered a blistering assessment of Britain's leader, labelling Starmer as inexperienced and completely out of his depth in international diplomacy. This wasn't just personal insult. It reveals Russia's strategic calculation that they're dealing with a vulnerable opponent who lacks the experience to navigate high-stakes nuclear diplomacy.
I just remind him, Russia is the aggressor.
What's particularly alarming about Moscow's response is how quickly they've escalated from diplomatic disagreement to outright threats. Russian state media has seized upon Starmer's precarious position, portraying him as precisely what Trump suggested, a leader making tough statements without possessing the military capability to back them up. They're expertly exploiting the gap between Britain's ambitious rhetoric and its hollowed-out defence reality. Popov's ominous warning that Starmer is playing with fire when dealing with a nuclear superpower represents a calculated escalation designed to expose Britain's vulnerabilities. The message couldn't be clearer.
They've been doubling down here at the G20 in saying we must give Ukraine the support that Ukraine needs for as long as it needs, put Ukraine in.
Russia views Starmer's tough talk as empty posturing and is calling his bluff in the most threatening manner possible. Meanwhile, Britain's declining global influence has become painfully apparent. Downing Street's desperate attempt to position itself as the bridge between America, Europe and Ukraine rings increasingly hollow as both allies and adversaries question the UK's credibility. What was once the world's preeminent diplomatic power now struggles to convince anyone it remains a serious player.
As far as the UK is concerned, I've been very clear over a long period that we must support Ukraine.
Military analysts raise an even more disturbing possibility, that Russia might not limit its response to verbal warnings. Moscow could decide to test Starmer's resolve through more provocative actions, calculating that Britain lacks both the military capability and allied support to respond effectively. This could range from increased cyber attacks to more aggressive military posturing in shared spheres of influence. So here's the reality Starmer now confronts: a diplomatic minefield with no clear path forward. Expert opinions suggest he must strike an almost impossible balance, maintaining Britain's influence without provoking Russia to dangerous escalation.
Been pretty balanced. But the bottom line is that some people will just want to hate everything that Donald Trump does because he's Donald Trump.
Trump's warning that the UK might struggle without American military backing isn't just political posturing. It's an uncomfortable truth about Britain's current standing. We've seen this diplomatic trap before during the Cold War, where nations caught between superpowers often suffered significant geopolitical consequences, regardless of which choice they made. Starmer faces this same lose-lose scenario: continue talking tough without the military muscle to back it up, or retreat and publicly acknowledge Britain's diminished role on the world stage. The upcoming international talks involving Ukraine will be the true test of Starmer's approach. These diplomatic exchanges could well define his leadership and Britain's place in global security arrangements for years to come. What's painfully clear is that Britain's global ambitions and its actual capabilities are dangerously misaligned, a gap that both Trump and Putin have recognised and exploit to their advantage.